Today is June the 24th, 2008. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University Library, and we're conducting an oral history project called Women of the Oklahoma Legislature. And today I'm with Joan Hastings Camp, and she served in the House 1974 through 1984. And we're at the OSU campus, OSU Tulsa campus. So thank you for joining me today.
Oh, happy to.
Let's start by having you tell a little bit about your childhood, your parents, where you were born, that type of thing.
I had a wonderful childhood. I grew up in Drumright, Oklahoma, and had a great neighborhood with lots of children to play with, and things were so much easier then. We could take 5-mile hikes, and parents didn't worry about it. Out in the woods catching tadpoles and chasing frogs and whatever. It was a really great childhood, just relaxed. I loved to go on the farm, and I became quite a tomboy and rode horses and, I don't know, just everything a little tomboy girl would do.
Did you have siblings?
I had 2 sisters, but they were 8 and 9 years older. And that has all the disadvantages of an only child without the advantages of an only child.
And what did your parents do?
My mother was the county health nurse.
Okay.
And my dad was deceased, and we lived in my grandmother's house with my grandmother.
Very fun. Learned how to cook then.
Oh, did I ever, from the very beginning. By the time I was old enough to stand on a box, she started me.
And then you got interested in politics when?
I think probably when I was about 8 years old. I remember that Leon Phillips was governor of Oklahoma, and he was a relative. We called him Uncle Red, but I think he was my father's second cousin or something. I don't know where it was, but something like that. But anyway, when he ran for governor, I was just a little bitty. And my mother was working very hard and handing out fingernail files that said, "Vote for Leon C. Red Phillips." And so I went along. And that was my first brush, you might say, with politics.
Well, in high school, did you take government and social studies that type?
I took a lot of history. I really liked history, but no. And had no interest in high school in politics that I can actually remember. I do in the presidential elections and such. I'd kind of get interested in who was running, but 21 looked a long way off.
Well, do you remember casting your first vote?
Oh, yes. It was for Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And I was just 21 in October, and that election was in November. And I had become active in the Young Republicans at Tulsa University. And that was a fun thing for me in the beginning. And then it got a little bit more serious. And then I got elected Miss Republican. And that led to all kinds of little adventures. I actually got to know Pearl Mesta and Pearl Sayre, both hostesses from Oklahoma. One, of course, they made the movie, but Pearl Sayre was just as elegant. And that was fun, and that was from being Miss Republican. Then I got to go to Washington, D.C., and actually ride an elephant down Pennsylvania Avenue, and that was a lark. That was just something, nobody can believe. It was great fun.
Well, how did that come about, though?
Well, when I was Miss Republican here, then I ended up being in a state centennial contest representing the Republicans. And the Shrine Circus was here. Okay. So I got an offer to ride in the parade with the Shrine Circus, to lead the parade, as a matter of fact, on an elephant. Well, riding an elephant just sounded like a wonderful thing to me. I just thought that was great. So I did, and I found out, you have to shave an elephant with a blowtorch?
No.
Well, you do, or if you don't, they're really prickly. They got really bad here. That's why they wear those new hops on them to sit on. Mm-hmm. And so I was okay. Mine had been shaved completely, and it was fun. But there was another girl who represented the Shrine. She decided if I was going to ride in her parade, well, she's going to ride too. And she put on this little bitty short harem-type outfit. And she rode the circus elephant for the Shrine, and it hadn't been shaved. She was miserable, just miserable. My elephant that led the parade was from the Tulsa Zoo. And she was very well trained by Hugh Davis, and she just did everything right, and she was smooth. So I had a lot of fun. Anyway, from that, our Congressman Paige Belcher thought it would be great fun. I went to the Young Republican National Convention in Washington. And they were going to have a parade, and I don't know how exactly they worked it all out, but they did. And I got to ride the elephant down Pennsylvania Avenue, and I have pictures of it.
And had it been shaved?
Yes, it was fine.
That has been very neat. A lot of people watching too.
Yes, of course, here in Oklahoma, I wore an Indian costume, and it was all leather. Well, that's pretty protective, really. And in Washington, that's in the days of the crinoline underskirts. I must have had on 4 can-cans, and then a big blue billowy skirt over that. I don't think an elephant hair could have gotten through that.
Well, what time of the year would that have been?
That was in May, first part of May.
Weather's okay then.
Yeah, it's pretty. Cherry blossoms are just finished, if I remember right. Gosh, that's a long time ago, Tanya.
Well, what was your major in college then?
I majored in education and special education, and I taught special education for a while, and also taught gym, physical education, excuse me, and loved children, so that was a good thing. But then I found out there was such a need for the special education teachers, and I had a dual, so I did that.
Okay. And then what got you interested in running for a political office?
Well, I consistently said I never would, that it just would never, ever happen. But there came a time in my life when I'd had a tremendous tragedy, and I was just kind of drifting, and my young Republican friends decided that I would run for office. Well, the man that I had to run against in the Republican primary had only lost to the incumbent by 15 votes in a recount 2 years before. So it didn't look like a very good opportunity, shall we say. And I was smart enough to realize that it surely didn't look very winnable. But they were just gung-ho. Please, Joan, do it. You need to do something. You're really going into depression deeply, and this will pull you out, make you work. You got to work. You got to do something. So, I think I was just kind of railroaded into it, to tell you the truth. And my husband was agreeable because he never for a minute believed I could win. And I think some other people weren't too sure I could win either, but they were going to get me busy and make me do something I was interested in. Well, it had different results than we expected. We won. I'm really proud of it. My bridge club, my Sunday school class, and the Young Republicans. That's what I had to work with.
Okay.
And we raised money, not a tremendous overage of money, but we raised enough money. And we won every single precinct in the district by large amounts. I was just overwhelmed by what happened. I couldn't believe it. I still can't believe it. Then we had the general election. Well, that was by a very handsome man named Ray Mullins. He'd been a sportscaster, and he was always, winter and summer, very tan, prematurely gray hair, big, beaming, white teeth smile. Oh, Mr. Glamour. And strong Democrat support. In the area I had was all of South Tulsa. That's east, west, all to the county lines. A lot of that area at that time was heavy Democrat precincts. Bigsby was heavy Democrat then. Glenpool, Jinx was heavy Democrat. That's all changed, but that was all big time Democrat. I had up to 41st Street in the other part, and so of course there were some Republicans strong in that. Not that much. And it was just, I thought it was an amazing thing. We won by the highest plurality in the whole United States.
Gosh, that's saying a lot too.
It was just amazing. We had
How did you do it then?
worked. I mean, the volunteers were just outstanding. They were on the phones, ringing those phones, and I would knock on someone's door, and the person would come to the door, and I would say, "Hello, I'm Joan Hastings. I'm running for," and they'd say, "You're Joan Hastings?" "Yes." "Well, your office is on my phone." And sure enough, they were talking to my office at the same time I was knocking on the door. And Tanya, that happened many, many times. I just had tremendous volunteers. And then I did work the precincts. I knocked those doors. Oh, forgot to tell you, in the Bigsby area. Okay. I had 3 horses. I had a huge English riding horse that was 18.5 hands tall, and for the horsemen will know that's tall. The only way I could get on him was get to a fence or get to a porch or something. I couldn't get on him from the ground. And then I had a little pinto, and then I had a Morgan quarter horse. They had to be exercised. Out in the Bigsby area, all the houses were acres apart, but not a whole lot. Some of them were like an acre, 2 acres, maybe 5 acres. But I had a big Cadillac, and in the real hot sun, start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. And it was ruining it. And it went out on me several times. So I decided my horses need exercise, and I'm a good rider. That's what I'll do. So I campaigned the whole South District. Even when I got over into Glenpool, I got a horse trailer and took my horses over there. And I'd ride one in the morning and a different one in the afternoon. And I'd ride up to the houses, and as long as I was on the Morgan quarter horse, well, I would get off, of course, and go knock on the door, unless somebody happened to be in the yard or something. But I really couldn't get off that great big one unless there was some place to get back on. And during that time when I'd leave the Morgan and just let him stand, people would say, "Aren't you afraid your horse will run away?" No, my horse wouldn't run away. He's very well trained. I prayed my horse wouldn't run away. But there usually wasn't any place to tie him. And then the Morgan, I don't mean the Morgan, I mean the big English riding horse. Beautiful gray animal. I didn't get off of him. I rode him usually when people were on weekends, when people were out in the yard working and this kind of thing. There are still people today that see me in restaurants and laugh and say they remember when I rode up to their house on that great big horse and asked for their vote. And it worked. Obviously, it just worked. I rode the little pinto a little bit, but he was wild and, he was a hootenanny horse.
Well, did you do that for each campaign then, or just the first one?
Never had another campaign.
You didn't have any opponent?
No, I served 10 years with never another opponent. So we must have scared him out the first time.
Well, that was before term limits. You could have kept running.
Yeah, I could have kept running, but my mother and father were really getting old, and I didn't have my sisters that were deceased. I was the only one to take care of them, and I didn't want to leave. I was literally being handed a Senate seat, and I wanted it, Tanya. I really wanted it. But I came home, and by then I'd been active in the National Association of Legislators and was an officer, going to be president next year. Just all kinds of things. The Women Legislators Association, I was elected there. So I was gone a lot, even on the off term. Well, I looked at my mother and stepfather and this isn't going to work. There's nobody to take care of them, and they're too old, and that's just the way it is. So I went back and announced I'd be leaving the House and that I would not run for Senate after all. And it hurt. But I knew that's what I had to do. Well, an amazing thing happened. I don't think it was even a week after I made that announcement that the Tulsa County Clerk died. And there were already 2 people, I think it was 2, maybe 3 in the race. Republican primaries, by the way, were very unusual then. We didn't have enough Republicans to have primaries, basically. So my friends started, "You're going to run for that." And I told them they were crazy. I'd never tried a countywide race, and that this was not an acceptable situation. I was wrong. They won again. And we jumped right in that, and by the time I got in, I was 8 or 9 in that primary. There'd never been that many people in a Republican primary in this state before. Well, it worked out very well. Same volunteers, Bridge Club, Sunday school class, young Republicans, and here they came. And we worked really hard, and we won it real big.
And you were there? 16
years.
16?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No opposition there either. It was just a charmed life.
Sounds like it.
I was just, each time I'd kind of get ready and think, oh boy, here we go. And it didn't materialize.
Well, let's back up a little bit. When your first election and the election night, do you remember much about it? Your first election night?
I remember being totally overwhelmed by the margin that we won by, and looking around at all my friends, and just the tears were for the friends that had worked so hard. I just couldn't believe that they had promoted me into that. And then, of course, I really didn't quite yet know what they'd promoted me into. But the overwhelming gratitude was the biggest part of it. I wasn't yet thinking about actually going into office. That took a little bit to sink in.
What did they all go to their swearing in ceremony?
You wouldn't believe. They rented 2 MK&O buses and filled them. I mean, filled them. And there were some cars going too because the buses were filled. We almost filled the gallery in the house with just my volunteers. Wow. That made a strange impression on the other representatives. Not altogether good. They thought I was just bragging, I guess. I was the first female person to be elected from east side of I-35, which you know is the divider in Oklahoma, and no other woman from the eastern half had ever won. So we were kind of a cause celebrate in its own way, but then to fill the gallery with volunteers, that looked a little presumptuous. We didn't mean it that way, but that's how it looked to them. So I wouldn't say that was the best foot to start on, but it worked. And later I'll tell you a story about how well it worked for me on something.
Well, go ahead if you want.
Okay.
While you're thinking of it.
One of the first bills I had, in fact, well, it was one of the first. The very first bill was to computerize the Supreme Court records. Now you can imagine in '74, computers weren't in yet. And for me to go over there, a brand new person, and write to computerize the Supreme Court records, which Marion and Paula had asked me to do. I'm not saying I was bright enough to think of it. But it did pass. And it was very hard fought, and it was difficult in passage because they knew what computerization was, and you don't mess with the Supreme Court. Well, we did. But then the next thing was to cure the flooding in Bixby. Okay. We had 1,100 homes that flooded every time. Just small rains could flood them. Hakey Creek and Joe Creek were always out of their banks. So it wouldn't take that much to cure that. And I knew that years and years before that, I had written an interlocal cooperation bill and just taken it to a legislative friend to cure a park program here in Tulsa. And it allowed counties, cities, states, any entity of government to monetarily cooperate with any other entity of government under the circumstances of the written contracts and such. So I knew it could work. I was immediately told by the House Speaker that that would not be legal. I could not get state conservation money for a district's flood control. I didn't believe him. And I knew that Jim Jones, our Democrat congressman, was going to help me try to get some federal money for it. So I did it anyway. Well, then I got called to the governor's office, and Governor Bourne said, Representative Hastings, you cannot pass this bill. I promised the people there would be no new boards, committees, agencies, anything that required money. Nothing new. We've got to settle this budget. Oh. Well, had 1,100 homes flooding. So I didn't pay attention to him either. I went on with it. I got a lot of co-authors to help me. But every time the bill would come up for a vote, was going to come up for a vote, my co-authors would get approached by the governor's office, and they'd disappear off the co-author list. So it was very difficult to find enough votes for that particular thing. I did, finally, there was a blanket donkey coon hunting bill being offered by a Tulsa Republican representative who was just going to make it illegal to raise cocks to fight. You couldn't even have them, period. Well, he had the SPCA helping him, which is pretty considerable. Well, the boys from southeastern Oklahoma particularly were very upset about that. And they didn't want that bill to pass. And they were the very ones who've been giving me some trouble. So I went to them and said, you want your bill to pass? I'll kill the cockfighting bill if you'll pass my bill. Ha! What makes you think you can? And I said, what makes you think I can't? You don't have anything else to go with. So John Monks of Muskogee. Oh, ain't even done. They said, we don't think you can do it. I said, well, I'm telling you I can't. Anyway, we did. And I did kill the cockfighting bill. And they then passed my flood control bill. And it went to the Senate. Well, when it got to the Senate, the senator over there from a far southeast area loaded my bill up with a lot more money. I wasn't asking for very much money. I was asking for $80,000, which to cure 1,100 homes, I mean, that's a lot. I mean, that's not a lot. Well, anyway, he loaded it up with like $300,000 for his district. Uh-oh. Whew. That meant it had to come back and pass the House again. So I went down to the conservation director and asked him to show me this creek that this $300,000 was going to cure. It was a dry creek bed, hadn't had water in it in years. So it was a setup. His representative over on the House representative side, I better leave this nameless, both of them. But anyway, it's very genuine. He put some more money in it when it came back to the House. Well, now I'm carrying $500,000. And $300,000 of it's for a dry creek bed. And they don't think I know that. So I went to the House member and I told him, I said, do you remember all those busloads of volunteers that came over with me for swearing in? Well, how could we forget them? I said, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. If you and Senator so-and-so don't take that money out of my bill, I'm going to bring those busloads and some more right into your district. And when the election comes, we're going to knock on every door and we're going to tell them what you did to 1,100 Oklahoma families. And you won't come back over here. You're going to be through. Well, now, Hastings, just don't get mad about it. I said, I am mad about it. You get that money out of my bill, or I promise you neither one of you will get back over here. We'll do what we have to do. They took it out of the bill. They weren't sure. And so my volunteers being in the balcony did finally, on something, it helped. It definitely helped. Because they believed me by then. And I would have. And so it was an adventure. And it sounds like I would make these people mad. They didn't really get mad. They just kind of thought, well, that's surprising. We didn't know she had it in her. But they'd just keep testing. Constantly testing. So being a female representative was really, you had to be on your toes all the time. Really did. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. Oh, I passed the Narcotics and Dangerous Drug Bill to form that agency. That's another one Boren got in on and told me, that's two. You cannot, in my regime, have a new agency, board, or commission. Same thing. We needed it. We really needed it. They were trying to do narcotics work with OSBI agents that were not allowed to wear cowboy boots or have long hair, and they had to wear coats and ties.
Kind of hard to be undercover.
Oh, you can't do that. So it was a very, very hard fought bill. It was, I guess it was my hardest one. No, not quite. There's one other that's worse. But it was almost the hardest one. And we did ultimately get it through Took a lot of work, and I had to stand those same people up in the corner and say, no, no, no. And they put up with it, so.
Something like that would happen during the course of one session or a year or two?
It was in the first 4 months of Boren's governorship. Now, he meant well. Let me tell you, he meant well. We need to do that right now. We are opening so many new agencies and boards and commissions, and we're putting money in all of them. They're good charitable things, but we can't afford them. And that's what Governor Boren was doing, was pulling that back. Well, he did a good job of pulling it back. It just so happened that those two things that I did, I felt my 1,100 families, and then I felt my narcotics and dangerous drug bill was important enough to challenge. And it was a really hard fight, but both of them did get through. Not many others did. So for a freshman, that was kind of different.
Yeah.
And part of my success came from the craziest thing you'll ever hear of. I got put on the wildlife committee. Well, I've hunted since I was a child. I told you I grew up in Drumright. I had a BB gun probably by the time I was 6. And that's just the way of life. So when I grew up older, I rabbit hunted and squirrel hunted and quail hunted and duck hunted, and that was a norm for me. And I continued that through adult. Well, my friends here in Tulsa wanted someone on the wildlife committee that they could talk to about the duck laws and all the other game laws. And so Harold Stewart was real close friends of the governor and the speaker and the pro tem. And he and the men from Ducks Unlimited requested that I be put on the wildlife committee. I didn't ask for the wildlife committee. And I found out I was on it, and I thought, oh dear. For a female representative, this is probably not wise. So I will just go sit real quiet. And I'll try not to get into anything, just vote. That was my full intention. I went to the first wildlife committee meeting, and they had this ridiculous bill to make your hunting license come due in your birthday month. Well, I'm a duck hunter, and I sat there and thought about that. Can't do that. You got to put a federal duck stamp, you got to put a federal duck stamp pasted right onto your Oklahoma hunting license. And it's got to be pasted on when the law says it. Okay? You have to put that on January 1st. For those of us like me whose birthday is later in the year, then if we have to get a new Oklahoma hunting license, we got to buy a whole nother duck stamp, which I think were $16 if I remember, and put it on. Well, the sportsman would be furious. It isn't that much money really, but the principle behind it, yeah, they're going to be really mad. So I sat there and thought, no, this will go away. They had the discussion. They all thought that was a wonderful idea. So finally, I held up my hand, and Representative Converse said, the lady representative's got something to say. Oh, very disparaging like. And I just asked him, I said, what about the duck hunters? They all looked kind of, Converse didn't even take the bill off the agenda or anything. He just pushed it aside, said, next bill. It wasn't disposed of any other way, just pushed it aside and said, next bill. So that was the end of that. But then, I'd say about 2 weeks, Hollis Roberts, who was a new representative that came in when I did, came over and he said, boy, Joan, what about that blanket donkey coon hunt? Aren't we going to have a great time? And I said, why, yes, you guys will just have a wonderful time. I think that'll be super for you. He said, what's this for you stuff? You're one of us. And I said, oh, now wait, I don't anticipate going with the wildlife committee on your hunts and your different things. I don't plan to do that. I'm just a member of the committee. He said, that's what I'm saying. You are a member of the committee. And if we do, you do. Uh-oh. I said, well, Hollis, I wasn't invited. So let's not worry about it. Oh, no, that wasn't good enough. Hollis leaves my desk and just literally sprints to the front of the room where the big dog Democrats sat. And he brings Lonnie Abbott back, who is hosting the hunt. It's on Judge Busby's ranch, and Lonnie says, well, we didn't know you didn't get an invitation. Of course we want you to come. Ooh, how do I get out of this? I don't even know what a blanket donkey coon hunt is. So I said, well, tell him not to worry. No, nothing's going to do. I've got to go. And I said, well, if I have to go, then I'm going to bring my secretary and another friend, because I'm not going on this by myself. Oh, that's all right. We got plenty of room. Be all right. Well, I go home, and my Bigsby campaign manager, Dorothy Watkins' husband, was a coon hunter. So I asked Dorothy, what is this blanket donkey coon hunt? Well, it turns out the donkeys are all trained to jump the fences if you put their blanket on it. They're trained to their own special blanket. If you put the blanket on a bush, they'll jump over the bush. If you put it on a fence, they'll jump over the fence. Oh, okay. She said, now, you have to wear a hard hat with a light on it, strapped under your chin, because you're going to be going right through the woods, running. And you have to wear insulated coveralls, because it's going to be bitter cold, and insulated gloves. And you have to have the thick ones, because running through the brush will tear up your hands. Oh boy. And boots. Heavy boots. Well, being a hunter, I already had that. And I had the insulated coveralls. She provided the hard hat with a wheat light on it. Now, this is just like a construction hard hat you got to wear. Okay, I'm ready. And I took some extra clothes of that kind for my helpers. So we go to the hunt. One of the funniest things, Tanya, I've ever seen in my life. The ranch women came from all over and prepared a great big dinner for everybody. And the Chamber of Commerce came. It was a big thing for the community. We didn't go out till midnight. So at midnight, everybody's there to watch us go, It is the bitter coldest night that had been in Oklahoma in, I think, 22 years, something like that. Long time. Now we're out there getting on the donkeys. Kenny Converse was about 6'4" or 5", and he's kind of bow-legged, and he's so tall. And he gets on this little Jenny. And Lonnie Abbott is shorter and kind of chubby, and he gets on his donkey, and it looks like Ichabod Crane and Friar Tuck got loose in the night. I started laughing. I couldn't stop laughing. And they're the wildlife committee heads. They got to lead the parade, So, big full moonlit night. And here goes everybody on these donkeys. Well, Senator John Dahl had brought me a trained Jenny, as they call it. I couldn't believe that little donkey. She could single foot right and single foot left. She could canter and gallop. She was a gaited donkey. I'd never heard of such a thing. She was as good as my English riding horse. So my ride was very pleasant. We get to the first fence. And I get kind of off away from them. And I rip my little blanket off that's behind my saddle, and I put it on the fence. And sure enough, that little donkey goes over that fence, just boom. I climb over the best way I can, roll up the blanket, put it back on, get on the donkey, and here we go again. And the men would say, the dogs would be going, and they said, there's old Bell, there's old Blue. They had all these names. They knew the sounds from the dogs. I'd never experienced anything like that. It was fun. It was different, but I won my spurs. The men never for a minute believed I'd go, number one. Definitely I wouldn't be able to keep up, number 2. I would hate it, number 3. And none of those things happened.
Have any of them bothered to tell you about the blanket and the fences?
Nothing. No, they were giggling to themselves before we went, thinking, boy, this is going to be a big prank on Hastings. This is really going to be funny. And then they had a skeet shoot. Well, like I told you, I've shot all my life. I did real well. And you know what? they accepted me after that. Made all the difference in the world. I could feel the attitude change.
What else did you hunt?
Well, later through the years, there was a pheasant hunt every year, and it was way out in Kansas. Oh, this is one of the priceless ones. So we're out in the Panhandle for this pheasant hunt. Lawton Chamber of Commerce is sponsoring it. And it's a 3-day hunt. And you know, there are banquets at night, and there's a chamber, everybody comes in, Chamber of Commerce, the ranchers and such. Second day of hunt, yeah. They have guides for us, and they take us out and put us in the fields. Well, when you pheasant hunt, there's a line of people that come down and sweep the rows where the corn or wheat has been. And then it's what they call blockers up here, so that if the pheasants run on the ground, the blockers stop them and they fly, and that's when you shoot. Well, we're spread out across this field, and we have a little 9-year-old boy hunting with us. So he attached himself to me, which was fine. And we're beginning to sweep the field. Representative Muskelly says, "Hey, look at that. What are those Sunshine Boys doing over here?" The Sunshine Boys is what they call the Kansas Highway Patrol because they got big sunflowers on their cars. I don't know. That's real strange. We found out real quick. Those Sunshine Boys called us off the field and put us all under arrest for hunting in Kansas without a license. We had a guide. We explained to him, and even the little boy, in Kansas, all children that hunt have to, now it's okay in Oklahoma, this is the law here too now, but all the young people had to have passed a hunting course for young people. Well, of course, that wasn't the law in Oklahoma yet. So the little boy too. The fines were huge. I can't remember now how much it was, but it's like, I think it was like $100 a person. It was big. Well, we're out in the hunting fields. We're not carrying that kind of money. We had a motorhome with us. And I quietly told that little boy, I said, "Hey, while we're talking to them, you just kind of scoot away and you go get in that motorhome. And don't you come out for anything. I don't care if they tell you to come out. Don't come out. The motorhome is on the Oklahoma side. I know that." So he starts, and he gets a little ways away, and they see him going. "You, son, come back here." I was real proud of him. He kept going. I guess I was teaching him not to be law-abiding, but I just thought it was all just ridiculous. And sure enough, he went over and got in the motorhome, stayed there on the Oklahoma side. They made us get up enough money together. We had to all pool money to get enough money to pay that fine. And then Representative Muskelly went with the highway patrolman to, I don't know whether they mailed it in or took it to, I don't know what they did. They went to the court, they went somewhere and paid it. And we were, of course, just incensed. And our guide was incensed. He said, "But this is my dad's land, and I know the Kansas border is right here somewhere, but not this." We paid. Oh, it made the news. Our governor wrote their governor wrote our governor, and it was a big hoo-ha. But anyway, that was another one of the interesting hunting stories. Only time in my life I've ever been arrested or fined, but I got it that time.
I don't think anyone else has told me those stories.
No, I think my life in the legislature, because I hunted and fished, was a little bit different. Because I didn't think anything about, I had 6 boy cousins, and I kind of grew up with them. The youngest one was just a few months older than me, so just stair steps from there. And those boys would put me on horses and try to make me ride pigs and just crazy stuff, you know. And so I was accustomed to that kind of thing. It's life. And if they're going hunting, and if I'm really expected to do this, sure, I went too. And lots of times I took my husband with me. A whole lot of the time I took my husband with me. He said it's the best opportunity for hunting he had ever had. Because if people were going to entertain the legislator,
sure,
they wanted to give them the best possible hunting. So, and fishing sometimes too.
Did you gut them and clean them and all that
No.
yourself too?
No, my family had a rule that would incense most males in other families. Women hunted and women fished. Women cooked, but women never cleaned the game.
I could do that.
So I never had to clean game at all, ever. And I think I did clean a few fish because I fished by myself sometimes. But that's it. And we used to, after the big hunts, we would have an all-game dinner for the legislators.
Mm-hmm.
Tanya, the invitations were literally just sought after. And the wildlife people, the game rangers and all, they'd bring in fish and they'd bring in game to add to what we had. And we'd all bring in ours. And we would get the trade winds there used to be by the Capitol, to let us use their kitchen. And we would cook them. Well, there I got to be, of course, me being the only woman, I got to be the major domo of the kitchen and order these guys all around. You do this, and you do this, and you do this. We turned out some great food, fabulous food. And we just had the wildlife rangers and some of the legislators, and that was it.
Do they still do that?
No, haven't. It was called the Buffalo Stomp. And we'd get a cowboy band in and play two-stepping music. And it was a perfectly harmless, wonderful entertainment. The Supreme Court justices, everybody went. And like I said, the food was really good. The band was good. Sometimes the Highway Patrol band played, and they were very good. And then we'd dance around the pool, the boot, scoot, and boogie.
That's once a year or every other year? Or?
Once a year.
Once a year.
Usually just before closing. It'd be late May, but see, we didn't get out until July lots of the time. We worked lots longer months. And people say, well, you're not over there to play. Now, I've only been telling you some of the play stuff. Now, we were passing bills dead serious. And I guarantee you, tempers got hot on the House floor on the things that we were dedicated to. But we had a release valve. And it was these things I'm talking about, was the release valve, where we didn't get so angry with each other that we would lose the camaraderie, that we didn't get so angry with each other that we couldn't go ahead and work together. And there's not much of that left over there now.
Well,
they really draw the line and get angry with each other, and it doesn't go away.
You did those types of things with the men. Did you do anything similar with the women?
Oh, absolutely. Some of the women went on some of these things. They just didn't necessarily hunt and fish. They went and ate and looked pretty and, but they went. They just didn't hunt and fish. I was trying to think if any other one. I think Dorothy Connigan may have hunted with us a couple of times, but that wasn't anything they'd ever done.
Well, did you live down there during the week, or did you commute?
I lived down there during the week. My secretary and a long-term friend of mine that worked for Gene Howard, we shared a 3-bedroom, 3-bath apartment. Okay. It was at, I can't even name the thing now. It's out on Northwest Highway. But anyway, that was our relief valve. It was a gated community that we were in.
And did you come down Lincoln then to the Capitol in the morning?
And that was quite a sight.
That was before the dome too, though, wasn't it?
That was before the dome. But even then, you go up Lincoln and the sides weren't very pretty then. But the building, it was just impressive. Mm-hmm. And I would often think, I can't believe I got here. This is all unreal. And then I'd get there for work. Oh, it was real. It was very real. I remember the first day I went to the Capitol to serve.
Oh, tell us. I
pulled around the Capitol. You have to go all the way around to get to the House parking lot. Pulled in the House parking lot. Got out of the car, and there was a green coat there. We hadn't been assigned parking spaces yet, so there was a green coat to take the cars and put them away. Stepped out of that car and looked up, and there's those big birds on each. They're not eagles. I don't know what they are. Gargoyles or something on the corners of the building. And that big archway. Oh, what have I done now? It was like, I think I'll go home. And David Hall he was governor at the time, and in kind of disgrace. He was standing halfway up the steps.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. And he ran down a few steps, And he just swung me around and said, "You're going to love it." I'd known David since he was district attorney. We were different parties, but I'd known him since he was district attorney in Tulsa. Knew his wife Jo and his family and all. And it was a shame that such a brilliant person got caught up in the bad things that he did, because he did a lot of good things as governor. We find sometimes the people who go wrong, they have their good sides.
Mm-hmm.
But once they go wrong, they don't belong in public office, that's for sure.
Well, where was your office the first time around?
Well, now that was interesting too. After I got up those stairs, which I said was so impressive, and I stepped inside the building, I really felt overwhelmed. So I knew to go to the 5th floor. All Republicans had to be on the 5th floor. Democrats never came to the 5th floor. That was kind of like being ostracized. You know, you guys are up there. I don't remember how many of we Republicans were there when I first got there, but I think it was less than 15. There were very few, very few. So I went up to find my office, and I walked in, and this desk was dirty. I'm talking dirty. Kind of huge. So I looked that over, and the office had been closed up, of course, since July, and nobody had been in there and cleaned. That was kind of a shock. And I thought, okay, I guess it's up to me, and I'd come over early. And so I made a list of what I needed to clean the desk with, and started going through the desk, and there were things in the drawers, just all kinds of really old, and it was dusty. And in doing that, I told you about we called him Uncle Red, Leon Phillips, governor of Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And then I gave fingernail files out for him when I was about 8 or 9. Pulled out this little booklet that was the Democrat convention booklet, and it had Uncle Red's picture on the front of it.
Goosebumps.
And I just sat there, and it kind of gave me goosebumps.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat there and read the little book a little bit and told a little biography of him. What a strange thing, Tanya, that in that whole 101 House members, that I got the desk that had obviously been Uncle Red's at one time. How? You know, it just, I don't know,
And for that item to have been there,
and for that item to have been there for that many years, Tanya, he was governor in the 40s. See, and this was 74.
30 years later.
And that was right there in the desk. And everything else was dusty and stuff. I've always wondered about that. If it was a coincidence, what a terribly strange coincidence.
Mm-hmm. Very.
But it kind of set a tone, too. I thought, well, history says he was a good governor. I hope I can be as good a representative.
Sure.
But I'll never forget it. And I still got the little booklet. So that was interesting.
Or earlier you mentioned there were 3 bills that you struggled with, and you've talked about 2 of them. What was the third one?
Okay, gosh, there was the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. I didn't count the Supreme Court normally in it so much. And the flood bill. Oh my, yes, I know. It wasn't my bill. I didn't write it. But there was a move on. I was vice chairman of mental health by then. And drugs and alcohol were a real terrible, recognized scourge of the young people also by then. And when I first got there, they kept saying, oh, that's not a problem in Oklahoma. Well, that was head in the sand. Anyway, they were going to lower the drinking age down to 18 years. Mm. David Riggs wrote a bill, and my seatmate, Helen Cole, wrote a bill. Well, naturally, I would have preferred to support my Republican seatmate, Helen Cole. Mm-hmm. But her bill really, honestly, wasn't as well written as David Riggs's bill. And they had to come before the Mental Health Committee. That was their assignment. So I tried to get Helen to join David as co-author of his bill. And she absolutely, adamantly did not want to do that. She wasn't going to join with a Democrat. And I told her, I said, well, his bill's what's going to come out of mental health committee. I'm sure it's the one that'll be voted out of mental health committee. So she didn't want to hear that. And it kind of hurt our friendship a little bit. But anyway, I went over to David Riggs and I said, David, your bill is the one we really need to pass. And though I may not sign on it as co-author since I'm vice chairman of mental health, I want to help you pass it. He said, Joni, it isn't going to pass. I said, oh, I think it is. He said, well, go to it, whatever. So I went around, got him a whole lot of co-authors. I think I had 32 co-authors. See, that's almost enough to be a third.
Getting close.
And so at that point, you can imagine the beer lobbyists were just pulling their hair out. They didn't worry about it at first. But now here it is. Joan's in the mix and she's got 32 co-authors on that bill. They got to do something. Well, there was a beer lobbyist named Gaddy, and I thought the world of him, but he came and talked to me at length. Please, Joan, don't get out of this. Don't do this. You're going to hurt your career. Well, Lou, it might be that I will. But we need this bill. Law enforcement tells me they've got to have it. And of course, we were going through the age-old argument, if they're old enough to serve their country, on and on and on, and raise it to 21 is terrible, and you mustn't do this, and fall on deaf ears. So the bill came to the committee, and I had the votes. And Speaker Dan Draper didn't want that bill to pass. So I had written another bill. What did mine do? Mine declared 3-2 beer an alcoholic substance. That's what it was. Mine declared it, and that was a shell bill to help pass the other bill. So I was having a lot of grief on it too, because that was worse than the 21-year drinking age. Far worse. I wouldn't change. And it gets to committee. And Speaker comes to vote against my bill to make beer, 3-2 beer, an alcoholic beverage. And he can tell, I've got the votes. So he called me outside the committee room. Hastings, what is it going to take to get you off of this? Whatever it is, tell me what you want. Whatever, get off of this. I said, you don't have anything that you can give me that I'd take to get off of this. He said, now there has to be. I know you. He said, you're a horse trader. There's some way here. You're working for something different. It's not this. I said, well, you're right about that. I'll drop my 3-2 beer bill if you'll let the 21-year drinking bill go through. It was the lesser of the two evils for him. He stood there and he said, I knew there was something going on here. I knew there was something going on here. I don't want to do this. And I said, Dan, I know you don't want to do this. But that's it. It's either or. And there's a good chance we'll pass both of them. He left. Didn't go back into the committee meeting. I went in, withdrew my bill, and he let the 21-year drinking age pass. And he could have stopped it, I think. I'm not sure. Anyway, we would have fought him hard. But that was the other one. That was the doozy of all, I guess, really. And that's the only way, was to run a shell bill, which I would have passed if I couldn't have gotten him off of that and let the other one go through. So that's how the 21-year drinking age got into law.
You have to learn to be a negotiator all the way around.
Oh, you've got to be a negotiator and a horse trader, like you said. And you don't trade out bad things. If that sounds bad, it shouldn't. Everybody's got their own reason for the laws that they write. And you have to understand that. And then you have to look at what's the most important for the people of the state of Oklahoma. And that to me means the majority of the people of the state of Oklahoma. And then you got to look at the heart of those legislators that are supporting your opposition and figure out what do they want most or what do they dislike most. Is it worth it? And that's the decision you make. And on that one, there wasn't a doubt in my mind I'd be perfectly happy making 3-2 beer an alcoholic substance. And I was perfectly more than happy getting a 21-year drinking age. It was a win-win situation. That goes back to about the cockfighting bill. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to defeat that cockfighting bill. Now that's one where I went on that I didn't want to defeat that. But the alternative was so much more important, and the only way I could get it passed was to go against the cockfighting bill. So I did. They wrote an editorial in the Tulsa World about cruel, senseless female legislator. Heartless, that's what they call me. Heartless female legislator. I wrote back and told them that I traded chickens for children and I'd do it any day in the week. So that's the kind of negotiating, and that's what you send these people up there to do, is negotiate. Because they're not just going to go up there and be able to pass what you want them to pass. Everybody's got something they want. So you got to make everybody want yours the most.
Well, it sounds like gender wasn't really the issue, it was the skills that you brought to the table. Not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily gender.
As it turned out.
Yeah. Well.
But, you know, when I first got there, Bill Bradley called me that socialite politician from Tulsa. Said, you just ran to show us you could get here. He said, you'll stay through this session, maybe, and you'll tuck your tail between your legs and go home. That'll be the end of that. And I said, Representative Bradley, I fully expect to be here as long as you have been here, and I'm young enough to do that. And he kind of startled back and he said, well, by golly, Hastings, you might make it over here.
Did you earn a nickname? Some people have. I'm
Not that.
Curious.
Oh yeah, they called me Mother Superior for a while. That's like being Carrie Nation in the legislature. But then let's see. The cheese room. They don't have.
That's possible. Gotta switch tapes just a minute. This is tape 2, and we were getting ready to talk about the cheese room.
Right. You know, there's all kinds of ways, as I was just telling you, to work in the legislature. Back then, they had what, because of press, became the infamous cheese room. And there was nothing infamous about it. There was a room, and it was in that Trade Winds Motel that was just down Lincoln Avenue from the Capitol. And it was just a great big one of their suites is really what it was. And all of the lobbyists, not one lobbyist, all the lobbyists went together and provided the cheese room. And it's where we could go after session, and they had snacks, and they had cheese, lots of different kinds of cheese, and they had cold cuts and just whatever, you know, they put out there this time. And they had wine, they had beer, they didn't have hard liquor that I remember, no, just wine and beer and cheese and food. And they played cards in there sometimes, and it wasn't for money. The door was always open. The door was never allowed to be closed. It was one of those big double doors. So, you know, it wasn't anything. Everybody that stayed in that hotel was aware. So people went there after session, and they would talk to each other about the day, what their bills, and how they needed a vote here, but this was legislators and senators, both House and Senate, talking to each other, just in a relaxed situation. Mm-hmm. It didn't last very long, maybe an hour, sometimes not even that. But you just kind of recap the day, and actually it was a good thing. Any animosities that had been brought out during the day in discussion and debate, they kind of got smoothed over in that. And they didn't play poker, they played bridge. They had a whole group of them that were really good bridge players. I was okay with bridge, and I played occasionally with them. But I was usually on my way doing something else. I was playing golf or something. I was leaving. But they did play bridge, and they did not play poker, and they didn't gamble. And nobody believes this because of what you've been led to believe in the press. Not that way. It was just kind of coming down time. And let's see, there was another one I was going to tell you. Oh, yes. We never had free time. I never felt I had free time. I had a friend, Emmeline McCormick, and she and I canned together every year. And we would make pies and put them in the freezer. She had several kids, and I just did it with her because I wanted to. And we had peaches, and we had apples, and we had pears. So this was our canning weekend, which would make it in probably late July or August. And we're at my house. She made the best pie crust, and I'm not very good at that, but I'm really good on the filling. So she made the pie crust, and I made the filling. And then we both made the jams and did the steaming and all this, that, and the other. So we're hard at it. Phone rings. And it's Dr. James, who's head of mental health. And he's saying, Joan, I've really got some things I have to talk over with you. I need to see you. Well, it's Saturday. I said, well, when? He said, well, I am here in Tulsa now, and I would like to come by. I said, okay, now you're going to have to understand that I'm doing some work that I'm not going to stop, but I'll listen to you and talk to you. Well, he came over, and here we were doing all this canning in my kitchen. I had a big kitchen. And he sat there and talked to me about mental health problems and some things we really needed to do. And I just kept working what I was working and seasoning and spicing and so forth. And of course it was smelling pretty good in there by then. So he said, this discussion is kind of about over, but he said, I'm going to stay till you get one of those out of the oven. And then so help me, the phone rang again. And this was the state public safety director, Paul. Anyway, he said he had an issue that we were going to have a committee meeting on. In interim session, we went right on with our committee meetings. And he had to talk to me. I told him the same thing I told Dr. Dratz. I said, well, I'm in an all-day work session, but I can talk to you. So if you want to come over, it's okay. Dr. Dratz is here now. He said, what? I said, oh, yeah, Dr. Dratz is here now. Oh, okay, fine, that's great. So he came over. Dr. Dratz was leaving in just a little bit. He sat there and told me about the Highway Patrol and what they needed in a law in this committee meeting, what they wanted to come out of the committee meeting and all. Which, if I remember right, the committee meeting was like Tuesday, I think. Of course, by then we're getting pies out of the oven. And he again said, I can't sit here without having some pie. We hadn't intended to cut one, but that's all right, we did. So that was a strange way of doing business. But you know, I felt good that they felt comfortable. Considering I was vice president of mental health, and Ross Duckett was sick a lot. That was our chairman. So he wasn't there a lot right then. And so I was it. So I felt good that they felt like in corrections, I served on the corrections committee in public safety, that's why. I felt good that they felt comfortable enough to just come discuss what was needed. But that's a very different way of doing legislation. Oh, it got into some funny things.
So weekends you came home.
Yep.
While you were in session, the early part of your term, ERA was a big thing.
Oh, was it ever? And that's another big story. I was opposed to the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, for anyone who's listening to this and doesn't really understand. And my reason had nothing to do with female gender equalization. It had to do with if we had federally passed the Equal Rights Amendment without amending some other laws, I truly believe we could have financially broke Social Security, because we would have had to immediately equalize the age of the sexes, which would have thrown a lot more people into the system. And then there were some insurance laws that if we equalized without taking care of those laws, that would be, and I'd already done the study. When I first got there, I had the legal department pull up a list of all the gender laws so that I knew exactly where the laws were different for men and women, and I'd already studied that. And I didn't feel we could pass the Equal Rights Amendment without doing lots of damage, both state and national. We needed to attack the individual laws first. Well, that wasn't real popular, because women thought we should just all be declared equal. Now, declaring us equal and legalizing it is another thing. They couldn't understand that, didn't want to understand that. So I took quite a bit of heat. Representative Helen Arnold, brought President Reagan's daughter, Maureen Reagan, to the Capitol, who was there to help pass the Equal Rights Amendment. Well, she asked that I let Maureen Reagan speak at the Republican caucus. I was caucus chairman. And I knew that the caucus members didn't want to hear her. They told me they didn't. But that's beside the point. I called the caucus meeting. Well, when you call a caucus meeting, that's a command performance for the most part. And whether they want to go listen to whatever it is, they will. So everybody showed up. I introduced Maureen Reagan, said that she was there in favor of the Equal Rights Amendment. Let the discussion begin. She started her speech, I guess we would call it. And she said something that triggered one of our representatives. And he held up his hand to ask a question, make a statement, whatever, and she called on him. And what he said didn't please her at all. And she called him a retarded bastard. What? I hit the gavel down. I said, this caucus is over. And she said, you can't do that. I said, I most assuredly can do this. I am the caucus chairman. The caucus is over. Gentlemen, you're all excused. She was livid. And I told her, I said, now, Miss Reagan, you can't come in here and call elected representatives bastards and get by with it. It isn't going to work. That just will not work at all. And you didn't start this conversation in a level, modulated way. You started it in opposition, and no one had even said anything yet. So this is not a workable situation. Oh my goodness. We made the headlines in the New York paper. We made the San Francisco Chronicle. We made every major newspaper in the whole United States that caucus chairman, Representative Joan Hastings, had thrown the president's daughter out of a Republican caucus in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. It wasn't all disfavorable, but I would do the same thing again. Her demeanor was not anything that was acceptable.
You didn't take heat from your caucus members, did you?
Oh no, they were proud of me. They were very proud of me, except of course for Representative Arnold. There were a few of the Republicans that were in favor of the Equal Rights Amendment, Helen being one of them. And I had the greatest of respect for that. That's fine, they can have their way. It's just that they brought someone there who acted demeaning toward everybody. And she acted like she was the president's daughter. That's not exactly the way to get through to people.
Win friends either, is it?
She didn't win friends or influence any people. And it turned out that she and Senator Denny Garrison, who was at that time working as David Boren's chief administrative assistant, had words before she ever got to our caucus. But of course, I had no way of knowing that. But that came out later too, and it must have been kind of rough languaged on her part. It's not acceptable.
No.
You know, you may be equal, but you don't have to prove it in certain ways.
Well, as you were getting into the office itself, did you have someone that you modeled yourself after, a role model in the political world? Not really.
Not really. I had a mentor here in Tulsa named Elizabeth Davenport, who was just a businesswoman here whom I respected immensely. Just thought the world of, and I thought she was just elegant and well-spoken and all the things I'd like to be. So, but she was my mentor, and other than that, I can't think of any specific person, no.
You said your Senate seat partner was Helen Cole. How are those chosen?
No, House Representative. She was in the House first, and then she was in the Senate.
Okay. How are your seatmates chosen, though?
Republicans and Republicans. Now, I did get a Democrat once. The Republicans all had to sit on the far north wall. I mean, right up against the wall. Now, if we grew too much, which we did, and then we took up all the north wall, then we had to be across the back and start from the back up forward again, because the Democrats got all the forward seats. So if it happened that we were unequal in our numbers, then and only then would you have a Democrat sitting beside you, which I had a Representative Don Denman that was a Republican when he came in the legislature, and he changed. Well, that's another funny story. When I first got there, Representative John Muskelly was chairman of appropriations. Now, I thought the world of John, but I'm going to describe John just like he was. Johnny had a great, big, huge tummy that stuck out, and his belt was under his shirt quite a bit, and John sometimes didn't always shave real clean, and he was very garrulous. That about sums John up. Anyway, but he's smart. Oh, he was smart. If he read a budget and such, he could turn around and start quoting it. He was real smart. He just didn't look real good. And he looked mean. So I don't know what the vote was. It wasn't anything that I thought was terribly important. Here comes John down the aisle toward me. And he gets to my desk and he said, "Hastings, get your head out. What kind of vote was that?" He's a Democrat. He's a wheel. And he's coming back here telling me how to vote? I said, "Representative Muskelly, I'm going to vote this any way I please. My constituents tell me how to vote, but you don't. I'd suggest you get back up on the front row with the big wheels where you belong." Whoa! He turned around and whoosh, there he goes. Well, Jerry Smith and Charlie Ford were both representatives then too. And one sat over here and one sat in front. And they said, "Oh, good grief, Joan. Go apologize, do something. You won't pass a bill the whole time you're here." That was not a cool move. And I said, "Well, he's not going to come back here and tell me how to vote. I'm the one that got elected. I'm not going to listen to him." They said, "Oh boy, you could handle it better than that." Oh well. And Don Denman is my seatmate at that time. And he was still a Republican at that time. Just a little bit of time goes by. And here comes Muskelly down this aisle. You can tell he's headed straight for Denman. I'm thinking, now what? First rule of the House. You're elected. Nobody can put you out of your seat except for illegalities, breaking the rules of the House. And then it takes a green coat to escort you out of your seat. That's our legal maneuver. Muskelly comes back there and says, "Denman, get up. I want to sit there." Denman gets up like a baby child and goes stands in the back. I'd have told him to jump. So he sits down beside me. And I sit there and I'm thinking real quick, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do now? Okay, make a stab at it. So I turned around and I said, Mr. Muskelly, we can be friends or we can be enemies. It's your choice. What do you want? And I stuck out my hand to shake hands with him. He just looked kind of startled. And then he shook hands with me. And he just kind of shook his head. He got up and went back up front again. Whew. Glad that's over. Dimon came back and sat down. That was probably on a Wednesday. And, you know, we leave session on Thursday and come home at noon generally, or sometime during the afternoon. When I went back to session on Monday, I was sitting in my office getting some work done. And you can hear kind of a buzz coming down the hall, people talking, and it was a little louder than normal stuff. And I kind of remember thinking, I wonder what's going on, but I was real busy. So I didn't get up to go find out what was going on. And the secretary's office is in with our office. Her desk just sits ahead of ours then. Now they have private offices, but we didn't. And here comes these two guys, and it's Muskelly, and he's got the speaker with him, Speaker Willis. And they come in, and Sue Green, I didn't know that that was anything unusual. And Muskelly says, well, I'm glad you're here, Hastings. Wanted to talk to you a little bit. Speaker's got something he wants to say. Well, what they did was offer me a place on the Appropriations Committee. Well, see, I already told you I've been put on the Wildlife Committee without my asking. And I had oil and gas, and I had corrections, and I had education. Here's another one. You only have 3 committees normal, 1 biggie and 2 smalls. So I said, what do I have to give up? Oh, yeah, you're going to have to give up one of your other committees, your choice, whatever. I think I need to think this over. I really believe I need to think this over. Speaker kind of grinned, funny little soft-sided grin, and he says, well, that's refreshing. I don't know what he meant. They talk a minute or 2 more, and they leave. Oh, they're no sooner out of the office than a few steps down the hall. All these Republican representatives are in my office. What's Speaker want? What's Speaker doing up here? What was that about? And I said, oh, well, he and Muskelly just came up to see if I wanted to be on the Appropriations Committee. He said, you are joking us. No. He said, Speaker's never been on the North Aisle up here before. Never been on this floor before. Oh, well, he just was. And they said, what'd you tell him? I said, I wanted to think it over. Oh, my God, you know. And they go get Kent Frates, who's our leader. And Kent says, Joan, don't think it over. Go down there right now and tell him, yes, you want on appropriations. We've only got 2 Republicans on appropriations. We can't get them on appropriations. Well, see, I didn't know that either. So I gave up education because I figured I could help education better by being on appropriations than I could by being on education. So I gave up education. And
that same day, or did you think it overnight?
No, they were so adamant. Oh, go down there before he changes his mind. We're going to get down there before he changes his mind. So I went down before he changes his mind. And that was it. And it was real good. And I served on appropriations until, I think I left it voluntarily. I know that. I'm not sure I left the last year I was there, or maybe the last part of the last 2 years that I was there. The schedule just became so heavy for me that I decided I'd been there long enough that was all right. I'd been subcommittee of everything. One of the years was 1983. We were really hitting a financial crisis in the legislature. And we didn't know how we would have enough money to get through the next part of the fiscal year from January to July of 84. 84? Oh, I think so. No, of 83. And so they picked 6 senators and 6 House members. to work us through that. And it must have been 82 and 83 instead of that, because I was there a little bit after that. And I was one of them. And we worked all through interim session. We called in all the departments. And we weren't going to do a zero-based budget, but that's basically what our questioning was about. We had to strip a lot of money out of a lot of places. We finished on Christmas Eve at 2:30 in the afternoon. But we had balanced enough to get through the next fiscal, into the next fiscal year. But that's when I thought, that's enough of that. Felt successful about it. And know I was really very helpful in it. But, at that point, everything was kind of crowding in on me, my parents and this other Senate decision and such. And so I thought, well, work through that. I think I can do without that a little while. And then it turned out I left anyway.
Well, that experience probably helped with the county clerk.
Oh, definitely. Everything I learned over there helped immensely with the county clerk's job. And that was very, very helpful. And also it helped me to go back and change some laws that county government needed changed that were for the benefit of, well, everybody for that matter. We had some archaic county laws that were just ridiculous. And nobody had ever really attacked them. So I got to be instrumental in a few of those. And that was fun. Because you went back and you applied your trade to another effort. So that was neat.
Well, do you have one shining moment, if you had to pick just one moment that was?
Well, I can tell you a funny one and then I'll think about the shining one, because I'm sure there was. Speaker also then, early on, told me he wanted me to go to Seattle, Washington and represent the legislature at the Legionnaires Convention. Well, again, I really didn't know, what do you do? But okay, so I went to Seattle, and I'll never forget, I get checked in the hotel, and I don't have a clue. I'd asked Speaker, I said, well, what do I do? He said, well, just go down and you find this man, whatever his name was, and he'll kind of show you around, and you just represent Oklahoma. Make us proud. Oh, okay. So I found that man. He welcomed me there and said they were very happy to have me there, and he gave me a paper where the different meetings would be. And then he went off to do whatever he was going to do. And I was like, whatever in the world am I supposed to do? There was a reception that night. I went to the reception. I didn't know a soul. That was miserable. It really was. And didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. Felt sure it's something I was supposed to be doing, but didn't know what it was. So I kind of just stood back and watched everything. Went to bed real early. The next day, I went to the meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning, and they set me up on the stage, and I sat there, and their business meeting is going on, and I sat there. And then they introduced me, and I sat there, and I sat there. And that was exactly it. It was to show Oklahoma's interest and presence to the Legionnaires, and that we cared about veterans and so forth. And that was why I was there. There was a big parade. Now this got funny. So the Oklahoma Legionnaires were going as Indians, so they got me all dressed up like an Indian. And we get in the parade. Well, there were a bunch of Indians there from Alaska, and I don't really even today know what this was all about, but they didn't want anybody impersonating Indians, and they didn't feel like Indians were getting fair treatment at all, and they were very angry. And we were carrying some signs. Maybe they just said Oklahoma Legion Post whatever and such. They took off the signs, they literally attacked us. And I'd never been in anything like that before. And the police then, of course, moved in and got them moved out, and I didn't get hit or anything. But you can't imagine what it's like to be walking down the street just in a parade representing Oklahoma Legionnaires and have a group just attack you for no reason that you know. So that was a strange experience. Let's see, a glowing experience. I played on the house basketball team. And we
the lone female, I suppose.
Only female. In all the surrounding states, I was the only female that played on the basketball team. And we had, like David Stratton, he'd been All-American, and I told you Converse was 6'5" or so. We had some others that were big names in basketball that were now in the House of Representatives. Their career was behind them in that, but you know, they really knew basketball. So they asked me to play on the basketball team because they found out from drum right that I'd played.
Okay.
No, I didn't want to do that. They kept on. So this night they were going to play the Central State College coaches at Edmond. There they came again. You got to play, Joan. We're short people. You got to play. Okay. So I got my secretary, Billy, to run downtown to the sporting goods store and get me the clothes I needed. And it got a little bit late. We both got home, and I had to get changed, you know, and then we head for Edmond. We got there, just like I said, a little bit late. The game was already in progress. Jog across they're down at that end. I jog across the court, you know, and sit down on the bench, and I'm feeling like nut one. And I sit there and I think, now they won't really play me. I know that. I'm just here because I'm an oddity. We're behind. And the coach puts me in. They played full court basketball. I mean, I'm not very tall. And these guys' strands are like this. Boom, boom, boom. And I'm trying to keep up and guard. You know, and I'm down about this high on them. My fingertips are touching about their nose level, and I'm trying to guard, trying to keep up, running up and down the field. Well, I'm keeping up pretty good. We get down to the right goal, I'll call it. Somebody makes a shot, and it's coming off a rebound. And I'm just almost under the basket, and holy, it's coming right at me. Now this guy's behind me, this behemoth guy's right behind me, and he's teetering like this. And I'm looking up at that ball that's coming down to me. I think I'm going to get it. And I jump as high as I can jump, which is not very tall. And I get the ball, and I do like this. Well, when I do like that, he's off balance. And he is now really teetering. And I just held my position that he's going to fall on me. I know he's going to fall on me. They penalized him for hovering. And they gave me 2 free shots. And I can't believe this to this day, Tanya, but the truth, I made them. I made both of them. I mean, it's incredible for me. You know, another thing that helped me get through. And it was pure the grace of God, because I couldn't do that again. But it worked. And it really helped me in getting through difficulties later with them. So a lot of little funny things, a really high point. I'd say being elected the first female legislator on the board of directors of the National Council of Legislators. Okay. And then I became the executive vice president of the Republican legislators and would have been president the next year. That's when I left to go be county clerk. But that was really outstanding because they hadn't had any women legislators on either of those boards ever before. So that was a biggie. There were so many surprises, just, you know, constant.
And 10 years is a lot to.
But, you know, there was a whole lot of work went into this too. In corrections, I went to every prison in the state. Did not tell them I was coming at all. I spent my out of session time and just showed up and said who I was, and I wanted to inspect their prison, and I didn't think that, maybe everything was like we'd like it to be, and it wasn't. And I insisted that I be shown the budget, everything. And because I was on corrections committee, but they can't refuse a representative. That's something I'm not sure our representatives now even maybe know. But it is in the law that a representative can go to any state-paid institution and do an inspection at any time, and they have to honor it. And I did. I went to the mental health institutes that way too, and I found some big infractions at times. So.
Did you go by yourself to these places?
No, I took my secretary with me. So, just she and I. She took all the notes and everything. I mean, we were official, very definitely. And then once Pearl Whitcoop, a reporter for the Tulsa Tribune, went with me, and we went to 5 of the prisons with her with me, and she wrote stories about what we found and so forth. But those people have done bad things, no question about that. But we owe them safety from each other and food and shelter. And it shouldn't be great, tremendous food, but it's got to be adequate, so forth. One of the things on one of those, I was inspecting McAllister, and that was even before I got elected. And, excuse me, I was campaigning, and I went to McAllister, and they had just burned the prison. You remember that prison burned? And he wasn't going to show it to me, and Mr. Wilson was the acting warden at the time. But I just impressed on him that I was going to win and that I was going to be on the corrections committee. I'd already made up my mind to that. And I didn't know anything at all about jails and prisons, nothing. And if he didn't show me, then I'm going to get on that committee and I'm not going to know anything, and I'm going to be of no help to you whatsoever. So why not? He decided he would. So he showed me all through everything. Very nice. Then he took me over for lunch to the women's prison. Now that was an adventure. I forget how many women they had there. It wasn't a whole lot. All fat. I mean, really fat. I thought, what kind of percentage is that you'd have this many women and all of them be really fat? That doesn't make any sense. Well, it turns out that they didn't have any exercise classes. They weren't allowed outside because that part of the women's prison was right there on the grounds with the regular prison. And they did the cooking for all the people that worked over at the other prison. People came to visit. I mean, with that day, I forget, the mayor came to eat from McAllister. There was all people that didn't belong in prison. The food was outstanding. I'll tell you what, those women could sure cook. And I got a real bad impression. They were fat because they were using all the real butter and gravies and sauces. And when I got actually elected, I went back again. Same thing again. And the food was just outstanding. I looked at their menus and it was like sausage gravy for breakfast and things. No wonder they were fat. But they weren't allowed outside, so they got no exercise. They had no skills being taught. Well, they were being taught cosmetology, but in Oklahoma, you can't get a license if you've been feloniously arrested. So why teach them something that they can't do? That made no sense. They didn't teach them typing. They had one typewriter for all those women. It was not good, and that was something I was real pleased. I was able to change that real quick after I got in, without even laws. It was just procedural changes and insisting, and that worked.
So what did you get? What did you change specifically?
They got classes in elementary math, and English grammar and written literacy. And they got a little bit of accounting, just enough they know how to do taxes and this, that, and the other. And they got commercial skills, typing and so forth. Computer wasn't, like I said, it wasn't there then, so not that. But it really got them started better. And they got exercise. There was a lady there for murder, and she'd been in this little cell that had a hallway outside, and they let her walk up and down the hallway. That was it. And it was dark in there. Well, she murdered somebody, true, but I don't know her reason for it. There's no good reason for murder, but still, that was cruel and inhuman treatment on behalf of the state of Oklahoma. Ugly. So there were a lot of things that just really, really made a difference.
Well, that's an example where you were proactive then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I did a lot of things for women's rights and for women's laws and changing in women's laws. The Displaced Homemaker Bill, that was my original bill. As it happened, my son died while I was in the middle of that, and Cleta Deathridge took over and passed it, but it was my bill, and I'd done all the work on it. So I did a lot of female law work, but, it wasn't anything like the Equal Rights Amendment.
Well, that was an interesting all in itself. Let me get my notes. We've covered a lot of stuff today. I think we've covered most of what I had notes to ask about. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
It's an experience I wouldn't have missed for the world. From the outside, I could have never imagined it being what it was. And I truly believe that those people I served with, for the most part, there were a few that I felt weren't really dedicated perhaps, but for the most part, they were very dedicated and they believed in what they were doing, and they really wanted to help the state of Oklahoma. I am totally convinced of that. Didn't always see eye to eye with them. The best way to kill a bill, by the way, was for one of them to get up and say, well, that's one of those old Tulsa bills. They had an animosity toward Tulsa.
Really?
In fact, all of northeastern Oklahoma was always cheated out of money, roads, highways, you name it. We never came out, and we still don't. Why? I don't know. I always tried to find that out. But I know that this old thing, well, it's one of those old Tulsa bills. It was usually, almost always, a death knell. Oklahoma City was fine. They had no grief toward Oklahoma City. I don't know. But it was there. Getting this building, OSU, I worked really hard on that too. Penny Williams, Charlie Ford, well, a whole lot of us did. And we did win, but it took several years. It would help Tulsa. And it was really difficult to do. I've still got my mortarboard hat that they gave us for being the sponsors of the bill that got this place in action.
We might need to scan that too.
I do have that easily. Now, that might be the only one of those you'd see.
Yeah, I haven't seen one.
Okay, I'll bring that to you. I'm sure I've still got it.
There's a lot of amazing stories.
And that's only, if I really sat and thought about it, I'd probably think 10 years is a long time.
Well, why Republican instead of Democrat? Is there any particular reason you chose to be a Republican?
Yes. When I told you about when I was little, and Leon Phillips was governor, well, people thought my mother might have a lot more pull than she did. And they would come to the house, and that was kind of hard times. And they would come to the house and ask mother to get them things and get them jobs and get them this and get them that. And I got a bad impression from it. I just plain got a bad impression. And then later, I don't want to insult my Democrat friends because I've learned, of course, it isn't this way. But I felt they just always asked for things that they hadn't earned. So I don't mean that in any context. I've learned better. But as a kid, you get some strange impressions. And that's the impression I got. And I didn't know anything about it, but I just thought, I'm not going to be like that. And then I got to TU, and, they were talking about, well, the Republicans are this and the Republicans are that. And in truth, I found that we're not all that much different. And you just have to do, irregardless of politics, you got to do the best you can do for your state and your nation, and you'll be all right.
That's a good answer.
But it's a real one.
Yeah, it's a real.
I saw times when partisanship really harmed our state and I deplore that. That's not good government.
I don't have anything else. I have one last question. If
Okay.
you don't have anything else, I'll go ahead and ask.
Sure.
When history is written about you, what would you like for it to say?
I did my best. That's about all anybody can do. And I didn't yield in the face of adversity. So that's what I'd like history to say about me.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to do this with me today, and I think you'd be a great role model for those yet to come.
Well, you know, we get old and people don't pay attention to us anymore, so it's been fun. But that is true. People don't learn from the past because they want to reinvent the future.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't reinvent the future. The past is always there with you. And if you don't accept and really examine it and look at it and ask people who've been there what happened when, you don't make as much progress as you could.
When was the last time you were at the Capitol?
January this year.
Oh, so you go back.
I go over and lobby every once in a while. If there's something important to me, I'll go and pound on them.
Do you get the same sense, feeling when you walk in the doors as you did when you actually
I do.
there?
I really do. That is the citadel of Oklahoma. Good and bad things come out of there. But if people took more interest in their government, if people went to visit more often and really watched it, it would make a difference.
Had you been there before your swearing in? Well, before you even ran?
Mm-hmm.
You'd been there. Some people haven't.
I know some people have never been to the Capitol. My mother, being the county health nurse, she was interested in us understanding government and why it was necessary and what it did. So I'd say she kind of gave us a good foundation in that. Us being me and my two sisters.
Well, Oklahoma's better for having had you serve. So
Well, thank
I
you.
thank
That's
you
a
for
very
that,
nice
too.
thing to have said.